You'd think waking up in a yurt would feel free and boundless. I'm your bedtime historian, and this morning you're rising on the Mongolian steppe, surrounded not by silence, but by snoring steam, and the distant whinny of horses tied just outside your door flap. Not that it's a door. It's a curtain of stiff felt, which someone just pushed aside without knocking. The felt blanket above you smells like milk and smoke. Underneath, more felt, possibly some straw. And above your head, a circular skylight ringed with wooden spokes, just wide enough for cold air, and the occasional bird dropping to slip through. Outside, it's windy, frigid, and probably spring. Or fall. There's no calendar, only the behavior of horses and clouds. If you enjoy traveling history through smells, discomfort, and lots of animal proximity, go ahead and tap like or subscribe. That way, I can keep whispering these strange timelines into your sleepy ears. Tell me, if you had to live a week in any empire, no modern comforts, where would you land? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The yurt creaks with movement as your host family stirs. You're lying beside two siblings, their elbows in your ribs, and someone's grandmother snoring steadily on the other side. She smells like goat butter and centuries of unspoken authority. As dawn bleeds into the sky, the woman of the household lights the dung fire. It smolders low and sweet, heating a blackened kettle. Soon you're handed a bowl of salty milk tea, thick, warm, and faintly tangy, the way fermented mare's milk always is before breakfast. You're not offered sugar. Sugar is a rare foreign pleasure reserved for royalty, or those clever enough to trade silk for it. No, this tea is about survival, and hydration, and politeness. You notice there's no furniture. The family sits cross-legged, or kneels on rugs stitched from horsehair and hide. The walls curve in around you, dotted with hanging bags, some filled with tools, others with snacks, and one with a large knife no one has explained. Outside, the winds are biting. As you step out barefoot, your soles meet frozen dirt. There's no paved road, no fence, no garden, just the plains. Your vision stretches farther than you can walk in a day, yet somehow it feels small because everyone is already watching. Your job: help with morning tasks. That starts with milking the mares, who, by the way, are not thrilled to see you. They kick, they bite, and they can smell fear, or maybe just foreigners. One sneezes into your shoulder with an audible splat. Mare's milk is essential. It becomes kumis, the frothy, lightly alcoholic staple of Mongol hydration. You help churn some, not well, but enough to be dismissed before causing property damage. Then it's time to ready the horses. Each one is vital not just for travel, but for war messaging and daily work. Saddles are carefully strapped, hooves checked. Some are lightly bled, yes, bled for sustenance. A small cut provides a protein-rich drink for riders on long journeys. You try not to gag as it's explained like one might explain oat milk, casually, proudly, and with minor judgment. One of the children hands you a bow. It's child-sized and still too powerful. You pull the string back halfway before your fingers sting. The child rolls their eyes and mounts a pony without stirrups, riding away at full gallop while laughing. There is no school, no clock. The entire family has work and skills by age 7. You're the only adult who can't ride, shoot, cook, or milk anything. By mid-morning, the men ride off to check the herds. Women begin sewing, braiding, or scraping hides. Children chase a dog who may or may not belong to them, and you are left with a skin bucket and some dung told to keep the fire going. Historians still argue how much daily labor varied between genders, or if these roles were as rigid as travelers described them. Some accounts say women had more freedom. Others note how quickly girls were married off, or traded, or left behind. But right now, you're more worried about the smoke in your eyes and the angry sheep blocking the doorway. The yurt, while small, feels infinite. Sounds travel through the felt walls, low conversations, the clatter of bone tools, and the off-key melody of someone singing what might be a lullaby or a complaint. There's no insulation, but there is rhythm. A new task awaits boiling offal for breakfast stew. The scent is unforgettable. So is the texture. You're told to chew with gratitude. And you do. Because here, survival means adaptation. And you're already 3 mistakes away from being the weakest link in the herd. There's a fizzing sound as you open the skin flask, and then a smell. Tangy. Smoky. Slightly alarming. Welcome to kumis, the carbonated and mildly alcoholic drink, made from fermented mare's milk, served at room temperature, and revered like champagne on the steppe. It's your beverage for the day, and maybe your shampoo too, depending on how generous your host family feels. The day's diet begins early, and doesn't change much as hours stretch across the windswept plains. You're handed a rough bowl, carved from horn, filled with pale, lumpy curds of dried cheese, air-dried, on ropes, some as hard as pebbles. You chew, and then chew some more. Flavor sour and slightly dusty, like goat yogurt that went to boarding school and came back tougher. Next comes mutton, always mutton, stewed, grilled, or dried. Today's cut is fatty tail meat boiled in a skin pot. No seasoning, no rice, just fat that clings to your lips and gums with the persistence of family secrets. Food here is not about pleasure. It's about endurance. Meals are swift, communal, and often eaten while squatting beside the fire, or even more impressively while riding. You watch a young rider gallop past with half a roast leg dangling from his saddle. He tears off a bite mid-canter, like it's the most natural thing in the world. There are no forks, no napkins, and no hand-washing stations. What you touch, you taste. And what you drop, you ignore. Cleanliness is spiritual, not sterile. The smoke from the fire does most of the disinfecting, and the rest is left to the wind and gut bacteria. Some scholars suggest that Mongol gut health may have played a role in their stamina. Generations of fermented raw and offal-rich diets made them near indestructible digesters capable of thriving on what would hospitalize a European knight or bewilder a Chinese bureaucrat. Yet even here, there are subtle rules of etiquette. You must never point your knife at another. Never touch food with your left hand reserved for, let's say, less savory duties. And you always pass the bowl clockwise. To do otherwise would insult not just your host, but the spirits watching over the yurt. Today's breakfast is eaten with silence and speed. No one chats. No one lingers. A woman nods at you and offers a strip of dried meat the size of a sandal. You chew it for 6 minutes before realizing it was intended for the dog. He doesn't mind. He's now chewing your shoe in revenge. The cooking fire, still fueled by dung, casts a lazy glow in the corner of the yurt. There is no wood for miles. Trees don't belong here, too slow, too still. Dung, on the other hand, is abundant, sustainable, and surprisingly efficient. It smells earthy, not unpleasant unless it's wet. Then it smells like regret. You help stoke the fire with a long iron hook. Sparks fly, and someone laughs. Not at you, at the absurdity of life, maybe, or at a joke in Mongolic you'll never understand. Laughter here is part of digestion. It settles the stomach. It smooths the ride. There is no dessert, no tea ceremony, just another round of kumis swirled and shared from the community jug. You've built up tolerance, or maybe you've just gone numb. Either way, the fizz tickles your throat like the idea of modern plumbing. Later in the morning, you're shown how to make bortsog, deep-fried dough twists. They're the closest thing to sweets on the steppe, and even they smell like goat. A teenage girl drops them into hot fat using bare fingers and the focus of a priestess. You try one. It's crispy chewy and absorbs kumis like a sponge. You nod politely and pretend it's delicious. She laughs again. This time, definitely at you. Throughout the day, food appears not as meals, but as moments. A scrap of jerky during herding. A bone marrow snack while checking saddles. A quick sip of broth before setting out on patrol. Calories are constant but invisible, like the wind or guilt. Researchers still argue over the Mongols' nutritional intake. Were they protein-heavy super athletes or barely fed survivors sustained by ritual and movement? There is no consensus, just bones. And they show a people rarely tall but rarely sick. As the sun climbs higher, your stomach adjusts. You crave fat. You miss salt. And you begin to understand why every traveler in Mongol lands wrote home confused, impressed, and slightly constipated. Your host offers you one last treat before the noon ride, a bowl of blood sausage made from lamb and garlic. You hesitate. But then again, you've already eaten shoes. The wind is your only companion as you walk a few paces from the yurt, clutching a small wooden paddle and trying to remember the instructions. Never face west, the elder warned. The west belongs to the dead. Unfortunately, no one told you which way is west. On the Mongolian steppe, there are no outhouses, no chamber pots, no polite euphemisms, just grassland horizon and the unnerving sense that the sky is watching. Going to the toilet is not just a private act, it's a spiritual negotiation. You crouch beside a shrub the size of a helmet and wait for inspiration. Behind you, the dog watches. From farther away, a herd of goats watches. And from above, Tengri, the eternal blue sky, definitely watches. You begin to understand why people talk to themselves out here. Privacy is a social fiction. The ground is hard, the grass brittle. You do your best remembering not to spit, point, or whistle during the process. Those too can offend the spirits, especially whistling. It's said to summon demons or worse winds that never stop. In truth, Mongols didn't obsess over sanitation the way future empires did, but they did observe invisible boundaries. Some areas were sacred hilltops, river bends, tree groves. To relieve oneself near these could risk disease, misfortune, or an unwanted visit from a curious shaman. You head back toward the camp, relieved, until you realize the dog is following you, carrying your forgotten wooden paddle like a prize. By the time you return, it's time to fetch water. This means trudging a half-mile to the nearest stream, filling 2 buckets that seem to weigh more than your regret, and balancing them on a wooden yoke across your shoulders. There is no indoor plumbing, and certainly no well. The water source depends on season migration and luck. Some scholars continue to debate how much hygiene mattered to the Mongols. Accounts vary. Chinese chroniclers accused them of being unwashed barbarians. Persian travelers noted their ritual cleansings before ceremonies. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle between custom and convenience. Inside the yurt, a mother brushes her daughter's hair with a carved horn comb. No mirrors, no perfume. Just a slow, methodical rhythm. Lice are removed without shame. braids are tightened. It's an act of care, not vanity. Personal grooming involves bone tools, boiled water, and bits of sheep fat used like lotion. You're handed a bit of this tallow and motioned to apply it to your lips. It tastes like last night's dinner, but it works. Teeth are rubbed with chewed twigs. Fingernails are cleaned with arrowheads. There's no soap, but smoke from the dung fire is said to purify not just objects, but souls. You sit in the haze and begin to believe it. Later, a ritual begins not for cleanliness, but for balance. A small offering of milk is flicked toward the sky, using the thumb and ring finger. It's a gesture of respect to Tengri and the spirits of the land. Even bowel movements can be followed by whispered apologies. You remember a story the grandmother told earlier of a man who ignored the taboos, relieved himself near a sacred rock, and later found his horses vanished. Cursed, she said, or punished. It's unclear if she meant it literally or metaphorically. Out here, the line is thin. Throughout the day, the rhythm of bodily life continues. Children scamper off behind hills. Elders sit quietly near stream banks. No one discusses it, but everyone participates in the choreography. There is no shame, only awareness. You notice that people often walk the same narrow paths to do their business. These paths curve around certain hills and avoid specific trees. They were never marked, but everyone knows them, and now you do too. One evening, after a hearty meal of boiled lung, you excuse yourself and walk out alone. The stars blaze above you, unfiltered by city haze. The grass rustles softly. You crouch with reverence. This time, you face east. There is no sound but the wind and your own breath. For a moment, the earth feels ancient beneath you. Then the dog appears again, this time with a bone. It drops it beside you like a gift. You nod, thankful. Surviving the Mongol Empire isn't just about battles or bravery. It's about knowing where not to squat. The sound is unmistakable hooves on hard earth, rapid and rhythmic, like a drumbeat echoing through time. You turn your head just in time to see a boy no older than 6 gallop past bareback, laughing as if the horse were part of him. That's because, in a way, it is. In the Mongol Empire, you don't own horses, you are horses. From birth, a Mongol child is wrapped in furs and laid beside a sleeping mare. Before they can walk, they are bounced in saddles strapped to still horses just to get the rhythm in their bones. Riding isn't taught. It's absorbed like language or stubbornness. You're given a steed today, not a war horse, a test horse, which is only slightly less spirited. You mount awkwardly, feet dangling far from the stirrups, which are carved from wood and softened with hide. The saddle is small, hard and high-backed, designed for speed, not comfort. Your host adjusts the girth strap and hands you the reins with the grin of someone about to witness a new form of comedy. Once you're on, the horse knows. It senses your hesitation, your tight hands, your beginner soul. It trots anyway, gently at first, then faster. You bounce, wobble, and flail as the plains blur around you. In the distance, 2 teenagers watch and clap politely. That's when you realize they've been riding since age 3 and could probably hunt you for sport. Horses aren't pets here. They are currency companions, transportation weapons, and even food. A family might own dozens, rotating them for different tasks. Travel herding, war milking. Yes, milking. Remember that kumis from earlier. You have horses to thank for that delightful fizz. The saddle you sit on is more than functional. It's symbolic. Saddle makers are respected artisans, crafting each piece from layers of woodhorn and leather. Every clan has subtle differences in style, high pommels for mountain riding, flatter seats for long-distance patrols. You now understand why a Mongol could ride for 100 miles a day and still shoot a bow while doing it. You're just trying not to fall off. Back at camp, you're shown how hooves are trimmed with iron knives. If a horse goes lame, it can be bled. Yes, bled. A small incision on the neck yields warm blood, drunk straight, or mixed with broth. It's not considered cruel. It's considered practical. A horse that gives blood today may save a life tomorrow. And unlike soldiers, horses don't complain. You witness a form of hoof-first healthcare. A mare with a limp is laid on her side, soot rubbed into her wound, and her legs gently stretched while a young girl whispers to her. The bond between rider and horse isn't sentimental, but spiritual. These animals are extensions of breath and bone. Children, not adults, often do the herding. You watch a group of them guide 100 animals across a ridge, singing in high-pitched tones that rise and fall like bird calls. One rides standing up on two ponies circus style. You suspect he's showing off for you. It works. Some scholars argue that the true power of the Mongols wasn't their numbers or weapons, but their horses. Fast, tireless, and obedient, these creatures allowed armies to travel impossible distances, to strike without warning, to vanish like ghosts. Mongol tactics relied on speed, endurance, and misdirection, all possible only because of horses. You're told a story of Genghis Khan selecting warriors not by strength, but by how many arrows they could fire at full gallop. You imagine yourself in that test, dropping your bow, your reins, and probably yourself within 10 seconds. The family agrees through laughter. That night, you help tether the herd near camp. The horses are tied nose to tail, forming a barrier against wolves and thieves. A few nuzzle you. One sneezes again. It might be affection or karma. Either way, you're now wearing it. Sleep comes easier knowing the horses are near. Their bodies offer heat. Their hooves offer warning, and their breath puffs like smoke in the chill night air. You think you hear singing again, distant, high, and wild. Maybe from the hills. Maybe from the horse boys returning late. Or maybe the wind is just galloping now, pretending it too was born in a saddle. The camp falls quiet when a rider approaches, cloaked in black face, expressionless. Everyone freezes. Not from fear, at least not openly, but from instinct. His presence signals something more important than age, status, or family ties. It signals authority. Because when orders arrive from the Khan, they arrive fast, without ceremony, and without room for argument. You're told to kneel. Not in prayer, but in obedience. The rider doesn't dismount. He merely hands over a carved token, nods once, and gallops off again. No names, no explanations. The man he visited bows silently, then turns to pack. He will ride out by dawn. No one asks where. Obedience here is not optional. It is life. In the Mongol Empire, to hesitate is to offend. And to offend is often to disappear. The rule of law is absolute but not written. You'll hear about the Yasa, the secret code of Genghis Khan, said to cover everything from military strategy to table manners. No scroll survives. No scribe dared record it fully. It was memorized, taught orally, and enforced immediately. You test the boundaries by asking how one becomes a Khan. The response is a story told in metaphor, involving a falcon, a lost arrow, and a tree struck by lightning. You don't understand the plot, but you understand the tone. Don't ask again. Punishment is swift, but rarely public. A man might vanish in the night, or return days later with a limp and a story about falling off a horse. If you're executed, it's often without bloodshed. To spill noble blood on the ground offends the earth. Instead, you might be strangled with a silk cord or crushed beneath the floor of a yurt. Some researchers argue that this brutal efficiency masked a surprising level of consensus. The Kurultai, a grand council of nobles, technically elected the Khan. But election is generous. Influence, threat, and reputation did most of the voting. Debate remains about how democratic these gatherings truly were. You sit in on a mock tribunal. A child has stolen an amulet from another. The adults listen in silence, then decide the child will spend 2 days fetching water for the victim's family. No yelling, no shame, just swift, clear justice. The boy nods and begins walking. Every clan, every family, every band of herders operates under this shared expectation: loyalty to the Khan, then to the clan chief, then to the household head. The structure is simple but absolute. Disobedience spreads like rot, quickly cut away. At dinner, the oldest man speaks softly of the Khan as both ruler and father. He describes the time when Genghis Khan rode among them in disguise, testing hospitality. The tale ends with a family rewarded for sharing their last bone of mutton. The man smiles. That bone is now a necklace, he says, and you see it dangling from his neck, polished smooth by years of pride. You're beginning to notice the absence of writing. There are no books, no scrolls, no signs. Stories, laws, and even treaties are remembered, not recorded. It's a world of oral precision where forgetting can be fatal. You make a mistake that evening. You speak aloud about a neighboring khanate and mention rumors of rebellion. The yurt falls silent. Eyes narrow. Someone quietly stokes the fire. No one corrects you. No one agrees. You are politely ignored for the rest of the meal. Later, an elder woman sits beside you and says, "Words are arrows, even when whispered." She pats your knee, then offers you a piece of cheese so hard it could kill a bird. Apology accepted. Outsiders often misunderstood the Mongol hierarchy as chaos. But you begin to see the elegance in its layers. There is no paperwork, but everyone knows their role. There is no signature, but promises are unbreakable. There is no parade, but loyalty is constant. The stars emerge one by one, like glowing checkpoints, in a system that runs without wires. You lie back on your mat, half listening to a story about a general who disobeyed a single order and woke up bound in felt. Whether the tale is true doesn't matter. What matters is that you remember it, because here forgetting can get you uninvited from the world. The sun has slipped away, and with it, the last illusion of warmth. A bitter cold descends fast, silent and total. The felt walls of the yurt flex and rattle, unable to keep the chill at bay. Someone seals the smoke hole above, and the inside grows darker. Not quiet, never quiet, but darker. Night in a Mongol yurt means surrendering to layers, layers of fur, felt, and flesh. You're shown where to sleep, between a cousin and a goat, both of whom snore. The goat's breath is oddly comforting, but its hooves are not. You shift, and it shifts back. This is your space now. No room for arguments. The floor is crowded. Grandmother nestles beside her youngest grandson, who clutches a bone flute. The father sleeps near the entrance closest to danger. A few feet away, the dog curls tight ears, twitching at distant howls. One horse neighs. No one moves. The family doesn't whisper goodnight. They simply stop talking. Sleep, like everything else, is practical. No bedtime rituals, No lullabies, just exhaustion and gravity. Personal space. A myth. You're wrapped so tightly you can feel other people's dreams. Someone's toe finds your rib. Another's elbow presses into your back. You're not sure whose. Doesn't matter. In this world, privacy is a luxury for the dead. There's no separate bedroom, of course. The entire yurt is one shared room, a single womb of felt. The only divider is an invisible one. Men sleep on the west side, women on the east, in between the hearth. This division is spiritual, not spatial. West is the direction of ancestors. East, the realm of the living. Occasionally, someone stirs to tend the fire. They crawl silently, so as not to step on anyone's head. The dung. Logs hiss and crackle. The smoke rises, curls, and settles sweet and heavy. It clings to your hair, your skin, your breath. You try to sleep, but your body has other plans. Every few minutes, a snore startles you, then a cough, then a whispered word. Mongolian low and quick like wind through reeds. You imagine it's a story being told in dreams. Outside, wolves yip. Far away, but not far enough. The horses stomp restlessly. One breaks free, and there's a flurry of movement. A boy leaps from the bedding, grabs a rope, and is gone before you understand what happened. Minutes later, he returns, hair-tousled eyes, bright horse secured. He lies down again without a word. Some historians wonder how much Mongols valued sleep given the interruptions. Others argue they adapted to micro-rests, snatching short bursts of slumber between duties. There is no consensus. Only these crowded nights echoing across centuries. You begin to understand the logic of this sleeping arrangement. It's not about comfort. It's about survival. Body heat is shared. Children are monitored. Livestock is protected. Enemies don't surprise a household already half awake. As your eyes adjust to the dark, you see outlines, shapes curled into curves, like commas, in a never-ending sentence. The rhythm of breath surrounds you, steady and slow. You feel yourself joining it, one inhale at a time. And just as you start to drift, a sheep steps on your foot. You yelp, quietly. The goat snorts. Someone murmurs a curse. A baby whines. You curl tighter, apologizing to the air. The mat beneath you feels thinner than a lie. The blanket above, shared by three, is mostly somewhere else. Still, you can't deny a strange warmth. Not from the felt or the fire. From the closeness. The undeniable truth that every sound, smell, and shuffle connects you to these people, this place, this moment. You think back to your own room, soft sheets, closed door, artificial silence. It feels impossibly distant now. Luxurious, yes, but lonely. Here you are, woven into a breathing organism. One great snoring organism with hooves and indigestion. Sleep comes slowly, then suddenly. You float somewhere between goat breath and a dream of galloping. In that dream, you're riding fast across the steppe alone. But even in the dream, you hear the others behind you, always behind you. And in this world, that's a comfort. Dawn doesn't arrive with a rooster, but with silence. A dense, solemn hush settles over the camp as word spreads, not through shouting, but through glances. Someone has died. You don't know who yet, but you feel it the way everyone moves slower, the way voices are clipped, careful. Death here is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is deliberate, secret, sacred. A man walks past, carrying a rolled felt bundle. You think it's a carpet, until you notice how gently he holds it. No wailing, no procession, just the quiet handling of something too heavy for words. You start to follow, but a hand on your shoulder stops you. Not today, not your place. In the Mongol Empire, death was never a spectacle. Even among nobles' funerals were conducted with minimal display. Graves were hidden sometimes in remote valleys, sometimes beneath unmarked mounds. The goal was anonymity. To disturb the dead was to risk misfortune for generations. You sit beside the fire drinking sour tea and watch as the eldest son of the deceased steps forward. He says nothing. He doesn't cry. He only removes his hat and walks to the horse pen. One horse is selected a beautiful black mare with white ankles. She is brushed, saddled, and led out. You know what this means. The horse is to accompany the dead. Some were buried with a single steed. Others, especially khans or generals, took entire herds into the afterlife. There are stories whispered and contradictory of high-ranking burials that included concubines, servants, even soldiers. Some scholars believe this is myth. Others point to excavations where skeletons lie curled beside richly dressed corpses, hands still touching. The debate continues, but here today, the ritual feels heavy with truth. You're told the family will ride out shortly. The grave will be dug in silence. No markers, no songs, no trail back. Sometimes mourners kill their own horses to prevent the site from being followed. Other times they trample the area until not even a hoofprint remains. It's said that Genghis Khan's own burial site remains undiscovered because every man who helped dig the grave was executed, and those who executed them were also killed. A final layer of secrecy. Whether this is fact or folklore is unclear. But the fear it inspires, that's real. Later, as the procession leaves, you help tend to the fire. The yurt is subdued, rearranged. Objects belonging to the dead are removed. A small bowl of milk is set outside the door, an offering to guide the spirit, or maybe to distract it. Death here is not final. It is a passage. Spirits linger, watch, whisper. You're advised not to speak the name of the dead aloud for a while, not until the soul has settled elsewhere. To call them back would be cruel, or worse, selfish. Children are kept indoors today, not out of fear, but respect. The young are still too open, too sensitive. It's believed they can hear the dead more easily. One child whispers into the fire, and her mother gently hushes her, stroking her hair. You think of your own traditions, funerals filled with flowers, speeches, closure. Here, there is no closure, just continuation. Life flows forward, like a river that accepts every stone without a splash. A rider returns from the burial, alone, his face unreadable. He dismounts, walks to the yurt, and sits. Someone hands him kumis. He drinks. No toasts, no eulogies, just a quiet clink of the bowl as it's set down. You learn that tonight a special chant will be sung, not for the living, but for the ancestors. Not sad exactly, but weighty. You won't understand the words, but you will feel them. Researchers still struggle to define the Mongol relationship with death. Was it animistic? Was it shamanistic? Was it practical? The truth lies in moments like this, where grief wears no costume, and yet everything is ritual. That evening, a circle forms around the fire. Voices rise, not in sorrow, but in something older. The chant is low, rhythmic, and seems to pull at your ribs. You don't join in, but you sway. You listen. You understand just enough to know that the dead are not gone. They're simply waiting somewhere ahead. Outside, the milk bowl remains untouched. A cart arrives at camp trailing ribbons and dust. Inside, two women sit beside a girl wrapped in indigo cloth. Her cheeks are painted, her braids stiff with grease, and around her neck hangs a small pouch, either an amulet or a dowry tally. She is not smiling. Courtship in the Mongol Empire is rarely about romance. It's about alliance survival and sometimes conquest. This particular union was arranged 3 summers ago, sealed with livestock salt and a promise made by two fathers beside a fire. Now that the girl is of age, the promise must be fulfilled. She's perhaps 13. You can't quite tell. Mongol life doesn't count years so much as seasons. What matters is whether she can ride milk and endure. Love is not a prerequisite. Usefulness is. You watch as she's welcomed not with applause, but with bowls of broth. No wedding bells, no white dress. Just a quiet nod from the groom's mother and a gesture toward the eastern side of the yurt. That's where the women sleep, and now where the girl will sleep too. A few coins exchange hands. So does a small knife part of the bride price, you're told. It's ceremonial, not symbolic. A knife is both gift and warning. Treat her well, it says, or else. Weddings here are rarely single-day events. There's no feast, but there is wrestling. Young men bare-chested and greased toss each other in the dust, while elders watch for talent, not just strength, but composure. Winning a bout doesn't earn you a prize. Losing one might lose you your standing. The girl, meanwhile, serves tea. No one asks if she wants to. It's expected. And yet as she moves among the guests, you catch glimpses of her confidence. Her movements are precise. Her smile small, but controlled. She's not just a pawn. She's a player who knows the board. Historians debate the status of Mongol women. Some argue they had surprising power, managing herds, holding property, even acting as regents during times of war. Others point to their role in marriage diplomacy and note how many were traded like goods. Both are true, perhaps. Mongol life is a study in contradictions. Women ride and rule, yet are bartered. Girls are trained for war, yet bound by kin. You ask someone about love. The response is a shrug. It grows, or doesn't, but she'll be fed. She'll be protected. Then a pause. And if she's clever, she'll lead. As night falls, the bride is escorted to a smaller yurt behind the main camp. This is her new home. No music plays, but outside an ant sings softly while stirring stew. The lyrics are indecipherable to you, but the tune feels like a lullaby wrapped in warning. Inside the new yurt, the bride and groom sit together on a single mat. A sheep's tail fat has been placed near them for fertility, you're told. The girl fingers the pouch around her neck. You wonder what she's thinking. You're told not to linger. This is private. The consummation is expected, but not observed. The yurt door is tied shut with a strip of red cloth. Tomorrow the elders will check the bedding. Tradition demands proof, but modern practice often skips that step. No one really talks about it. The next morning, she emerges first, hair unbraided, eyes steady. She feeds the dog, then begins cleaning the hearthstones as if she's done it 1,000 times. Perhaps she has. Marriage in this world is not a beginning. It's a shift in duty, a realignment. She will now rise earlier, cook more, speak less, at least in public. But among the women, in whispers and glances, power will flow differently. You ask if she's now considered a woman. An elder shakes her head. Only when she gives birth or kills a wolf. You're not sure which will come first. A few nights later, the girl sits beside you during a fire circle. She doesn't speak, just listens, nods, and occasionally throws a twig into the flames. You notice she's wearing the knife now, not hidden, but proudly at her side. Perhaps that's the true ritual of Mongol marriage, not the exchange of vows, but the quiet readiness to survive. It happens quietly, like most things here. A young man is accused of theft, not grand larceny, just a missing saddle strap and a piece of smoked mutton. He doesn't deny it. He simply lowers his eyes and waits. That's the most shocking part. There's no pleading, no defense, no shouting, just acceptance and the slow arrival of justice. In the Mongol Empire, there are no prisons, no stone cells, no iron bars. Punishment is swift, visible, and portable, designed to restore balance, not to punish endlessly. You learn quickly that justice here rides with the camp. You can't outrun it. It's part of the herd. A council of elders gathers. No robes, no gavels, just weathered faces and folded arms. The accused stands in the center, head bowed. A goat sniffs his leg unbothered. You're told that the council knows his family, his story, and the value of what he took. All of this will be weighed. The verdict: exile for 1 season. He is to leave the camp before sunrise and live among another clan, doing menial work to repay what was lost. A temporary banishment. A social bruise, not a mortal wound. You ask what would have happened had he stolen a horse. The response: he'd never steal a horse. That's a soul. Horse theft was among the most serious crimes, along with betrayal during war and defiance of the Khan's command. For such acts, punishments ranged from back-breaking labor to execution by suffocation beneath felt. Bloodless, silent, clean. The ground, after all, was sacred. Some historians note the Mongol system as surprisingly functional. Crime was rare, they argue, not because people were inherently good, but because punishment was certain and culturally embedded. Others suggest that what we call law today barely applies here. There was no central code, just tradition and memory. You witness a different punishment the following week. A woman is caught spreading false rumors about another family's daughter, a serious offense in a society where reputation can mean survival. Her sentence: to serve meals for that family for 3 full moons. Publicly, without payment. She does it without protest. But each meal is served with theatrical politeness, each bowl placed just a little louder than necessary. Justice, it seems, doesn't require forgiveness. One elder explains it simply: we can't carry prisons on horseback. But shame fits in any saddlebag. You begin to notice how discipline is woven into daily life. Children are corrected with gestures, not beatings. A boy who disobeys during herding is made to walk behind the flock alone for 2 days. He returns quieter eyes, lowered, but no worse for wear. There's an elegance to it, punishment, without cruelty, authority, without spectacle. Of course, that's not to say Mongol justice was always fair. Favoritism existed. Clan politics mattered, and power, as always, bent the rules. Some stories still circulate of cruel chieftains who used punishments to solidify dominance, tying men to galloping horses, forcing families to disown members over minor slights. But those tales are spoken with distaste, even embarrassment. They are not traditions, they are warnings. You hear whispers of a warrior who was once sentenced to exile, only to return stronger, wealthier, and with stories that made him a hero. Now he sits among the elders. Proof, perhaps, that justice here isn't just about control, but redemption. In your time among the camp, you never see shackles, never hear screams. You do see scars, though, on hands, shoulders, backs. Whether they came from justice or war, no one says. You begin to understand that justice here is less about law and more about balance. Every act, good or bad, tips the scale. The goal is not to punish, but to recenter. to keep the herd moving the camp intact. One night around the fire, someone tells a parable. A man steals a fish from the river. The river dries up. The man returns the fish. The river flows again, but it's never as full. They all nod at the end, not because the story is true, but because the meaning is. You sleep that night, aware of your own place in the herd. One misstep won't destroy you, but several, and you might find yourself waking alone under an unfamiliar sky. The sky is a hard blue, cloudless and humming with anticipation. Children chase each other with wooden swords, their laughter high and sharp. Behind them, a woman strings a bow as casually as another might string beads. Even the elderly seem to walk a little taller today, because warfare isn't just an occasional occupation in the Mongol Empire. It's woven into daily life, like horsehair into a rope. You're handed a training bow and told, "Don't worry, it only bruises." That's somehow less comforting than intended. War here isn't a job, it's an identity. From the moment you can crawl, you're expected to prepare. Boys learn to ride before they can run. Girls learn to aim before they can read. And reading isn't exactly a priority anyway, not when the nearest school is 500 miles and 10 battlefields away. You join a practice session just outside the camp. Targets are little more than bark slabs tied to posts. Arrows thud against them with satisfying regularity. The smallest child may be 4 hits dead center. Your arrow lands in the dirt. You consider pretending it was a warning shot. A man approaches and adjusts your grip. His fingers are cracked, his nails black with ash. He tells you about the 3-finger draw, the thumb release the rhythm of breath. You nod, pretending to understand, but your wrist already aches. Weapons are everywhere, but not displayed with arrogance. They are tools, not trophies. Each bow is tailored to its owner's draw length. Each blade honed for function, not flair. There is no decorative armor, just layers of leather felt, and if you're lucky, iron scales stitched into coats. Lightweight, flexible, deadly. You hear a story. Around the fire, a blacksmith so skilled he once forged 30 arrowheads in a single night while also delivering his second child. Some doubt the timeline. Others claim it was actually his wife who delivered the child. Either way, the man earned a new saddle. Scholars often debate whether every Mongol man was truly a warrior. Some argue that roles were more fluid, that craftsmen, herders, and shamans didn't necessarily fight. But evidence suggests that everyone trained. The Khan's law made no exception for profession. If the clan rode to war, so did the man with the plow. You're invited to observe a mock skirmish. No blood, just bruises. The teams split, and the strategy begins. It's not a chaotic rush. It's chess on horseback. Feints flanks fake retreats. Even in pretend battle, the deception is masterful. You notice that no one gives orders like a general. Instead, signals are passed with whistles, flags, or even posture, a tilt of the head, a raised arm. Silence speaks louder than commands. One rider performs the infamous Parthian shot, twisting backward to shoot while galloping away. The arrow hits a melon perched on a log. The melon doesn't even wobble. You clap. No one else does. It's not impressive here. It's expected. The idea of rest days doesn't exist. Every activity has a martial angle. Herding doubles as scouting. Cooking teaches ration discipline. Even wrestling, a popular sport, is designed to build combat instincts. Matches begin with a dance to honor the ancestors, then end with dust bruises and a handshake or something close to it. Later, you try on a helmet. It's too heavy. Your neck tilts awkwardly. A girl giggles and adjusts it for you. Try walking now, she says. You do. Everyone applauds. You realize they're clapping for surviving 5 steps. Despite the focus on war, there is little celebration of violence. Battle is treated like a thunderstorm, sometimes necessary, always dangerous. Warriors are praised not for how many they kill, but how few mistakes they make. You hear older men talk not of victory, but of preparation. He who prepares doesn't bleed, one says. Another replies, unless the horse does. They nod gravely. Horses, after all, are the true casualties of fatigue. Night falls, and the mock skirmish dissolves into a calm campfire. Songs are sung not about battles, but about mothers' rivers and lost arrows that flew too far. You begin to understand that warfare here isn't glorified, it's normalized, expected, practiced until it's muscle memory. And as you lie in bed, massaging your bruised wrist, you realize in this world, peace is just the space between drills. The fire crackles low, casting long shadows on the yurt walls. Outside, the steppe lies in silence. But inside, it's story time. Not with books or scrolls, those don't exist here. Instead, history hums through voices passed from throat to throat like breath. You settle in as the eldest man clears his throat and begins not with once upon a time, but with a slow, melodic chant. This is how laws are remembered. In song. The melody weaves through the smoke. At first, you catch only fragments, names you've heard, whispered battles, not found on maps, animals who speak in riddles. It's equal parts legal code, bedtime story, and communal memory. Each phrase is repeated twice, sometimes 3 times. Rhythm matters more than rhyme. There is no parchment in the Mongol Empire, no ink. But there is memory, trained, tested, and revered. You're told that forgetting a detail isn't just embarrassing. It's dangerous. The wrong word might offend a spirit. The wrong version might start a feud. A young boy picks up the song, continuing where the elder left off. His voice is soft but certain. He recites the lineage of Khans, not just names, but how each one ruled, how they rode, who they married, what omen was seen in the sky at their birth. Every detail feels stitched into his bones. You ask how he remembers it all. He shrugs, because someone remembered it for me. This oral tradition doesn't stop with law. Every night tales ripple through the camp, legends of wolves who saved babies, rivers that changed course for lovers, stars that once fell to earth and became swords. You listen entranced as voices rise and fall like wind through reeds. Sometimes the stories are told in riddles, sometimes in jokes. One night you hear a parable about a man who argued with a goat and lost. It's hilarious. But also, somehow, about marriage. Researchers still argue about the accuracy of Mongol oral history. Some say it preserved facts better than early manuscripts. Others claim it distorted everything with each retelling. There is no scholarly consensus. Only songs. And they have lasted. The most serious songs are those of the ancestors. These are not sung lightly. They begin with the lighting of incense, dried herbs, and animal fat tossed into the fire. The smoke must curl upward, straight and unbroken, or the spirits will not listen. Tonight, it curls perfectly. An older woman sings alone, now eyes closed. Her voice is low-cracked like dried leather. She sings of her grandmother's grandmother, who rode into battle with her newborn strapped to her back, of the storm that saved a caravan, of the arrow that flew for 3 days. You feel the stories as much as hear them. They thrum in your chest, settle behind your eyes. This isn't entertainment. It's education, history, therapy, religion, and rehearsal all at once. One man strums a two-stringed instrument, its body made from a horse's skull and hide. The tune is plaintive steady. He sings of a lost city in the west golden roofs, shadowless courtyards, a lake that boiled at night. You ask if it's real. No one answers. Or rather, everyone smiles. These songs hold contradictions with ease. A warrior may ride into battle on a flaming tiger. A shaman may turn into a bird mid-curse. A boy might become a star because he spoke too kindly. Logic is not the point. Memory is. You try to contribute, tell a story from your world, but it's too fast, too wordy, too modern. The listeners nod politely, then return to their rhythm, their structure. You realize that storytelling here isn't just a pastime, it's a system. And you, for now, are still learning the steps. Later, you watch a game where children must repeat a story backwards. One mistake, and they're out. The winner. A girl who recites an entire ancestry line in reverse, then adds a goat joke at the end. She is declared future grandmother material. As sleep approaches, the stories taper off. Voices dim. One final chant begins slow, deep, full of repetition. It's part lullaby, part invocation. You don't understand the words, but you understand the rhythm. It's the same beat that marked a punishment, a wedding, a battle, and now your sleep. Out here, truth isn't written. It's remembered. At sunrise, the yurt smells of ash and milk. A crow circles overhead, cawing once before disappearing into the clouds. This, your host whispers, is a sign, not a bad one, not a good one, just a sign. On the steppe, everything is a message if you listen long enough. You're about to enter the spiritual dimension of Mongol life, not churches, not temples, but a cosmos alive with voices. Every stream has a spirit. Every rock may be sacred. Every illness might be the whisper of a ghost. You don't believe in the supernatural here. You live in it. Today is a ceremonial day. A shaman or bo'o has been summoned. He arrives on a stubby pony draped in bells and bones. His robe is stitched with animal hair, metal discs, and embroidered faces. You're told not to stare, but you stare. He dismounts, silently walks to the fire, and throws something into it, a bundle of herbs feathers, and what might be dried lizard. The smoke that rises smells like regret and pine. He doesn't speak at first, just circles the fire, shaking a drum that sounds like thunder trapped in a saddlebag. Then the trance begins. He chants in guttural bursts. Not words exactly, sounds, rhythms. The kind of noise that bypasses thought and speaks straight to your stomach. He stamps his feet, throws his head back, and at one point begins to weep. Or maybe laugh. It's hard to tell. No one reacts. This is normal. Shamans, you're told, serve as mediators between the living and the dead, the human and the natural. They don't cure sickness so much as negotiate with it. If your joints ache, it may be because you stepped on sacred ground. If your dreams are troubled, perhaps an ancestor is bored. Historians debate whether Mongol religion can even be called a religion. There are no holy books, no single god, no standardized prayers. What they do have is Tengri, the eternal blue sky. Tengri is not male or female, not angry or merciful. It just is. Watching. Vast. Present in every breeze. You're told that before great battles, Genghis Khan would offer white horses to Tengri. After victories, milk was sprinkled toward the sky. Even executions were carried out without blood to avoid defiling the ground watched over by Tengri. As the shaman circles you, waving smoke from a burning horn, you feel a strange calm. Or maybe it's the lack of oxygen. He pauses, places a strip of cloth in your hand, and mumbles something. You're told later it was a blessing or a warning. Again, hard to tell. Spiritual belief here isn't separated from life. It's embedded in every act. When you toss milk on the fire, it's not wasteful, it's an offering. When you avoid a certain tree, it's not superstition, it's respect. Spirits don't live elsewhere. They live here in the dust, the wind, the horse breath. One woman explains her daily rituals. She bows to the east every morning, never whistles indoors, and always tucks in her children's feet when they sleep, so their souls don't wander. You ask if she believes in ghosts. She looks at you like you asked if horses eat. That evening, as the stars emerge, you help set up a ritual stone pile called an ovu. It's a marker, an altar, and a waypoint all at once. Travelers add stones to it, whisper wishes, tie blue ribbons. The color represents the sky. You tie one too. No one tells you what to wish for, but you make one anyway. Researchers continue to debate the structure of these beliefs. Some call it animism. Others say shamanism. A few describe it as proto-religion. But all agree it worked. It shaped behavior, bound communities, and created meaning in a life that could change direction with a gust of wind. The shaman departs before sunrise without a goodbye. Just dust hooves and a single crow cry echoing behind him. As you prepare for bed, someone ties a blue ribbon to your wrist. For Tengri, they say. You nod. And for once, you don't ask what it means. You wake to shouting, not of panic, but urgency. A scuffle by the horse pen. Dust kicks up. Then laughter. A woman emerges sword drawn, leading a startled stallion by the reins. Her face is flushed, her sleeves rolled, and her boots streaked with mud. This isn't unusual. It's Tuesday. Mongol women don't sit quietly by the hearth. They ride herd fight and, when necessary, lead. This woman, Borte, you're told has 4 children, 6 horses, and a scar across her jaw from a wolf she once stabbed with a tent peg. You try not to look impressed. It doesn't work. Later you see her sharpening arrows. Not for display, for use. When raiders threatened the herd last year, she was the first to shoot. 2 were wounded. The rest fled. Since then, she's kept her bow near the yurt entrance, just beneath the ladle. This duality, mother and marksman, is not rare here. In fact, it's expected. Girls are taught to aim before they bleed. Marriage doesn't end that training. If anything, it sharpens it. One afternoon, a group of women spar with staffs. No ceremony, no spectators, just practice. They laugh as they bruise each other. One snorts when you ask if their husbands mind. We trained them, she says. They're grateful we haven't finished the job. You sit beside a woman skinning a rabbit. She tells you about her sister, who once led a trade delegation across the mountains. Her biggest concern? Not bandits, not weather, but whether the Chinese envoys would take her seriously with a baby strapped to her chest. They did, she says, eventually. Some historians long dismissed Mongol women as background figures, part of the domestic sphere. But new research has shifted that view. Accounts from envoys and travelers mention women giving orders, managing wealth, even commanding fortresses. Coins have been found bearing female names. Seals of power, not vanity. There's a tale of a queen regent who ruled for 7 years while her sons warred. She negotiated treaties, punished rebels, and once made a rival general apologize in public while barefoot. You ask if that story's true. A woman shrugs. True enough. One night, Borte shows you her dagger. It's curved, worn, and not ceremonial. She lets you hold it. The handle is smooth from use. It's for wolves, she says. You're not sure if she means animals or men. She doesn't clarify. You ask if she's ever had to use it. She smiles faintly. Once, maybe twice. Power here isn't about shouting. It's about usefulness. If you can ride shoot, organize a migration, milk a mare, and still remember your mother-in-law's cough medicine recipe, you're indispensable. And indispensable means respected. That night, you notice something small, the way men listen when women speak. Not out of obligation, out of habit. The decisions when to move camp, when to trade, when to shelter livestock are shared. Not evenly, perhaps, but openly. Still, not all is equality. Some marriages are forced, some girls too young. Status can vary wildly between clans. And when men travel to war, women are often left with double burdens: herds, children, defense, diplomacy. The legends don't always match the lived experience. Even among the respected lines remain. A woman who kills in battle might earn praise or whispers. One who argues too boldly at a clan meeting might be ignored or worse. Power exists, but it walks on frozen ground. Still, you can't deny the confidence, the competence, the way Borte lifts her child with the same arm that can draw a bow, the way her daughters argue over the best knot to secure a saddle, not over whose dress is prettier. You ask her eldest what she wants to be when she's older. Like my aunt, she says. She commands 200 men. Then almost as an afterthought, she adds, and she makes the best cheese. The women here are not waiting to be written into history. They're living it between spoonfuls of broth and slices of tendon, between stitches and saddle rides, between legends and milk spills. You fall asleep, thinking of the dagger beneath the ladle, and how some revolutions happen one goat at a time. A shout goes up across the plain, not warning, not alarm, but something more exciting. The traders have returned. You wander out of the yurt to find carts arriving like small islands of color and chaos. Silk bundles, bronze mirrors, and what looks like a Persian carpet tumble off wooden frames, landing in puffs of dust. Children swarm. Adults eye the loot with calm curiosity. No one rushes. The wealth will still be there after tea. You're surprised. Mongols aren't known for invention, but they are unmatched in movement. And what they move well, that shapes everything. A mirror from China, a spoon from Khwarezm, an incense bundle from Tibet. The empire might stretch for thousands of miles, but its fingerprints are soft, felt more in what arrives than in what departs. Even if you've never left camp, you can wear silk, spun in Baghdad, drink tea grown in Yunnan, and sharpen your knife on steel smelted in Samarkand. This isn't luxury, it's circulation, and it touches every life from Khan to shepherd. Today's returning group includes 2 elders and a boy too young to grow a beard, but old enough to negotiate. You hear him argue about a set of buttons, glass red, probably Venetian. He wins, of course. They say Mongol children learn to barter before they learn to walk. You're invited to help sort the goods. Silver coins, many foreign, clink into pouches. Textiles are folded carefully as if blessed, and a strange iron kettle is held up and examined like a relic. No one knows what it's for, but everyone agrees it looks valuable. Trade here isn't business. It's identity. Mongol culture may not leave behind towering monuments or libraries, but it leaves behind objects scattered across the continents, each one a whisper of connection. Some scholars debate whether this counts as cultural achievement. After all, the Mongols absorbed more than they invented. But others argue that their genius lay precisely in this connecting disparate worlds, absorbing without erasing, collecting without collapsing. You ask a young man if he ever wants to visit these places, Baghdad, Bukhara, Byzantium. He shrugs. Why, they come to me. And they do. Traders, emissaries, pilgrims, even prisoners arrive with bundles, stories, and complaints. Some stay, others vanish. Their goods remain woven into Mongol life like threads into a saddle blanket. You spot a flute carved from bone, its mouthpiece inlaid with lapis. A woman tests it, then barters a chunk of dried meat for it. Later, she plays it while stirring a pot of dumplings filled with goat and garlic. You wonder if the song is new or just newly imported. That evening, the elders discuss what to keep and what to send onward. Trade routes don't end here, they spiral. What arrives from Persia might end up in Korea. What's bought in China might reappear in Kiev. The Mongol Empire isn't a destination. It's a relay. You see a child playing with a compass, a gift from a trader who swears it never points the same way twice. Whether it's broken or magical is a matter of debate. One man brags about a set of brass bowls inscribed with Arabic script. He can't read them, but he claims they keep food hotter. No one questions him. Belief is part of ownership. Later, you're shown a fur coat stitched with threads, dyed in indigo and saffron. It smells of foreign smoke and something floral. You ask where it's from. The answer, far enough to matter. Not all loot is traded. Some is taken. A silk robe rumored to belong to a Chinese noblewoman is displayed like a war medal. No one wears it. It simply exists, a reminder that movement isn't always peaceful. Still, the overwhelming mood is one of wonder, not conquest. Even the youngest children understand that everything has a journey, that nothing truly begins or ends here, it just passes through. You fall asleep that night, wrapped in a blanket, with strange embroidery, a gift, a trophy, a trade item long forgotten. You don't know, but it's warm. The ground moves before you do. It starts with murmurs, then hooves, then the great unpegging. All at once the camp begins to vanish. Ropes pulled carts, loaded yurts, collapsing like silk flowers folding at dusk. Within an hour, the place you slept no longer exists. Life in the Mongol Empire doesn't pause. It relocates. Your host family works with surgical speed. The yurt is folded inward like a blooming onion, in reverse felt mats, rolled poles, bundled hearthstones cooled and stashed. You try to help, but are swiftly assigned to out-of-the-way duty. Understandable. You nearly tripped over the goat again. Children know what to do. Even the toddler is stuffing firewood into a satchel. The grandmother whistles, and a horse trots up, like it's been summoned by spell. The goat, less cooperative, requires 2 people and a bribe of crusty bread. Nothing is left behind. Not ash, not dung, not even footprints once the herd passes over. The grass resets itself. It's eerie how clean it all looks, like no one ever lived here. You ride with the caravan as it moves not in a line, but in a slow, sprawling braid. Carts creak under pelts and pots. Horses snort clouds of breath into the cold air. The landscape doesn't change much, still vast, flat, windswept, but the horizon has a way of shifting moods. Today it feels indifferent. Tomorrow, it might welcome you. You ask where you're going. No one answers directly. Closer to water, someone says. Away from flies, says another. The real answer is wherever survival tells them. Routes are known by landmarks, not names or signs, but by feel. A certain bent tree, a patch of red moss, a way the wind sounds near a rocky ridge. There are no maps, no compasses, and yet no one gets lost. Researchers continue to debate how Mongols navigated such vast territory. Some suggest celestial reckoning. Others propose oral cartography, a memory passed down generation to generation. The only agreement they knew exactly where they were going. After several hours, the caravan pauses. Time to rest the animals, not the people, of course. You're expected to gather fuel rehang saddle packs and check the axle of a cart that has been moaning for the last mile. Lunch is cold, meat, hard cheese, and water scooped from a half-frozen stream. A child offers you a piece of boiled hoof. You decline. The child eats it anyway, without blinking. In the afternoon, the mood changes. A storm threatens. You can smell it before you see it: wet wind and ozone rushing like gossip through the ranks. Orders are barked. Tarps are tied. The pace quickens. By evening, the camp halts near a low hill half-sheltered by rock. The yurt skeletons go up again, like ribs reassembling a creature that had only been sleeping. Fires flicker to life. The goat immediately finds your bedroll. The whole journey, this movement, this rhythm, it isn't wandering. It's precision in motion. To outsiders, it looks chaotic. To those within, it's life. You realize now that the Mongol Empire wasn't built with walls or anchored by cities. It was portable. Everything that mattered could be packed, tied, and moved. And yet nothing felt unstable. This wasn't homelessness. It was rooted mobility, a paradox that somehow works. One elder tells you, a tent is lighter than a crown. You nod, pretending to understand. Later, lying beside your fire-warmed saddle, you think maybe you do. This way of life leaves little behind. No stone statues, no grand cathedrals. But perhaps that's the point. What endures isn't in what's left. It's in what continues. The fire crackles low. Stars blink open overhead, same as last night, different sky. You wonder if you could do this forever, live in motion, in story and wind. But the goat sneezes on your blanket, and the answer is probably no. Still, even in this quiet dance of tents and hooves, someone must carry the words that bind empires. The ones who don't pause, even when the storm does. You wake to cold air, brushing your cheek open, plain endless steppe sky, so wide it swallows your sense of distance. A lone rider approaches fast. His horse doesn't slow. Dust trails behind him like smoke. You blink, and he's gone. Just a blur in your memory. That was a yam messenger. And chances are, he just changed history. The Mongol Empire, vast and stitched together by silk snow. And fear relied not only on swords, but on something quieter, the riders. These couriers, members of the Ortu network, were not soldiers, but they carried power that could collapse cities. A single message could tell a general to stand down, a vassal to pay tribute, or a rival to submit or die. Their role, simple, in theory: ride. Fast, far. No questions. Messages were memorized or sealed routes unmarked except to them. They often rode alone with only one companion they trusted: their horse. One historical account describes the average daily distance for these messengers as over 200 kilometers. That's like riding from sunrise to moonrise without stopping through rivers, mountains, deserts. A relay system existed, yes, but sometimes the news was too sensitive. One rider, one pouch, no breaks. The quirky part: some couriers sewed the letters into their clothes. Others carried them inside hollowed arrow shafts. In at least one Mongol tale, a messenger was trained to fake sickness, get captured, and still smuggle the message to its target by pretending to cough up blood inside which a note was hidden. There's no scholarly consensus on how these couriers were selected. Some say they were elite scouts repurposed for communication. Others suggest they were recruited young, trained like falcons, loyal and quiet. The truth is, records are thin. The empire didn't like writing much about the people who knew too much. Still, what we do know points to a system both brutal and brilliant. Riders were given immunity from most local laws. They could demand shelter, fresh horses, and even food from any subject. But with that came danger. They were often targeted by rebels, rival factions, or weather. Some reportedly died from exhaustion, others from betrayal by the very people ordered to help them. One quirky law: if a messenger's message was lost or delayed, the punishment could be as severe as exile or worse. But if he succeeded under impossible conditions, he might be rewarded with land gold or promotion to a spy. Historians continue to debate how many of these riders survived their first year. The harsh climate, political risk, and sheer physical toll suggest the turnover was dramatic. Yet somehow, enough survived to keep the empire connected across 9,000 kilometers. So the next time you wait 2 minutes for an email to load, just remember somewhere out there in the 13th century, a young man was racing through snow on horseback with an arrow in his boot that held a letter capable of toppling a king. The wind bites harder as you crest the next ridge, but relief is in sight: a low timber building, smoke trailing from its roof, and a stable just large enough for 20 horses. You dismount before your legs fully know it, sliding into warmth barley stew, and a new mount waiting outside, saddled, fed, and ready. This is the Yam Station. Not glamorous, not memorable, but absolutely vital. Every 25 to 30 miles across the Mongol Empire from the eastern plains to the Caspian Sea, these relay outposts called Yam were the bones of the world's most efficient pre-modern communication system. They weren't castles. They weren't cities. They were checkpoints of trust, efficiency, and sometimes fear. Each station had its own keeper, often a local with imperial approval. Their job: feed the messengers, shelter the horses, and most importantly, never ask questions. The brilliance of the Yam wasn't in its luxury, but its scale. Thousands of these posts dotted the empire's vast territories. From Karakoram in Mongolia to the cities of Persia, they provided a rapid, reliable way for messages, goods, and even intelligence to travel faster than any army could. Historians often compare them to inns or medieval truck stops, but that undersells their precision. Every Yam had fresh horses, trained handlers, supplies, and maps. Although map in this case often meant carved bone tokens or fabric cords marked with knots and stains. Riders didn't change saddles, just horses. They'd hop off one beast swing onto the next and be gone in minutes. This created a near-constant flow of information. Royal decrees could move at a pace of over 300 kilometers per day, far faster than most European systems centuries later. One record describes how a command from the Great Khan could reach the farthest western provinces in under 2 weeks. That might not sound impressive until you remember there were no trains, no engines, just hooves pounding frozen dirt one after another. There's a popular but debated account of Marco Polo encountering these relay stations. He described them as marvelously organized, claiming they rivaled any courier system in Europe. But some scholars question the accuracy of his travel timelines, suggesting Polo might have embellished a bit. Still, the archaeological remains confirmed the network was real. Foundations of Yam stations have been unearthed in places like Kyrgyzstan and western China, sometimes with remnants of saddles, coins, and food storage. One quirky detail: some Yam stations offered medicinal herbs for the riders. Things like dried licorice root, or fermented mare's milk to soothe the throat and nerves. Riders suffering from saddle sores or frostbite might ride straight through anyway, as stopping too long could be seen as suspicious. The system was funded through a tax called the yarlik, levied on local populations. That meant villagers, nomads, and traders all contributed to the upkeep of a courier network they could rarely use themselves. This created some tension, especially when food was scarce. After all, feeding a royal horse could mean going without dinner. There's no scholarly agreement on whether the yam system made the Mongol Empire more stable or more vulnerable. Some argue it connected the empire like veins in a body, making it flexible and quick to respond. Others claim it revealed too much, allowing enemies to learn the routes and intercept messages. And yet for a time it worked. Orders flowed like rivers. Commanders anticipated threats before they appeared. Even traders and envoys benefited slipping into the courier system when granted temporary permission by the Khan himself. Imagine it a weary merchant in Samarkand receiving a silver medallion from the Khan, allowing him to ride the imperial line. For a few days, he's part of something vast, something fast. Then he hands back the token and becomes ordinary again. It's said that when the yam ran at full strength, a whisper in the east could become a roar in the west within days. That's power. That's speed. And it all began with a humble hut and a fresh horse. From a dusty satchel comes a flash of silver, a thin rectangular tablet glinting under the desert sun. Not money, not decoration, but power. The rider holds it up. The stable keeper bows and rushes to fetch food. A fresh horse is brought forward. No questions asked. This is a jurej, a passport not made of paper, but hammered metal and royal authority. Long before printed documents or ink-stamped booklets, the Mongol Empire developed its own form of identification, the silver or gold plaque, carried by imperial messengers, traders, and ambassadors. These tablets bore the stamp of the great Khan himself. To refuse aid to someone holding one was to insult the empire, and insulting the empire rarely ended well. The jurej worked like a mobile command. It could demand shelter, fresh horses' food, and even safe passage across enemy territory, assuming those enemies were wise enough to cooperate. The bearer of the tablet was often treated with the same deference as a royal official. The quirky part: these tablets weren't uniform. Some were elaborate, featuring ornate carvings and inscriptions in multiple languages: Uyghur script, Mongolian Persian. Others were plain practical, with just enough text to say, "This person is important. Do not interfere." There's a surviving account of a French priest traveling under Mongol protection who was given a garige and reportedly abused it. He demanded extravagant meals, forced inns to house his entourage, and even delayed military operations. When news reached the court, the tablet was revoked. No more privileges. Just another dusty traveler with a long walk home. Historians debate the origin of the garage system. Some trace it back to Turkic and Chinese influence, pointing to similar tokens used in earlier dynasties. Others argue it was a Mongol innovation, born out of necessity, given the empire's staggering sprawl. Regardless of its origins, the garige made communication and movement possible on an imperial scale. A courier might arrive at a yam station in the dead of night, hold out the silver tablet, and receive not just food, but updated intelligence, fresh maps, or warnings about bandits ahead. And it wasn't just couriers. Diplomats, scholars, and merchants were sometimes granted temporary gariges, allowing them to travel freely through lands they might otherwise never see. It was a little like being handed the keys to the empire for a limited time. One surviving jarij, now kept in a museum in Russia, bears the inscription, "By the power of eternal heaven, let no man stop this bearer." It's not hard to imagine the weight of that message, literal and metaphorical, pressed into your palm as you rode through unknown lands. Of course, not everyone honored the tablets. In some border regions, especially where imperial control was thin, locals ignored or even stole them. There are tales of imposters crafting fake garijas, sometimes crudely, from tin or brass, trying to bluff their way into yam stations. Some succeeded. Others were caught and dealt with. This led to a curious tension. The gariji symbolized trust, but it also created opportunity for deception. So while it opened doors, it also made certain doors dangerous to knock on. Researchers continue to debate how many of these tablets were in circulation at any given time. Some suggest a few hundred. Others believe there were thousands, varying by rank and role. Without comprehensive records, the truth remains uncertain. But what's clear is this: in a world where language loyalty and law shifted every 100 miles, the garage was a passport written in the one language everyone understood, fear backed by empire. And as you imagine yourself holding one surrounded by unfamiliar faces in an unfamiliar town, the power of that small silver slab becomes palpable. You don't need to speak the local tongue. You don't need to plead your case. You just raise your hand and the road opens. The room is dim, just a sliver of light filtering through a crack in the wall. A monk-like figure hunches over parchment, dipping a reed brush into ink made from charred bones. But this isn't prayer. It's encryption. The brush flicks symbols in 3 languages onto the same sheet, and then it disappears, vanished into a pouch, a robe, or perhaps a hollow cane. In the Mongol Empire, secrecy was both an art and a necessity. For an empire built on movement, troops, traders, envoys, information was currency. And like all currency, it needed protection. So the Mongols borrowed, adapted, and sometimes stole the best messaging tools from the lands they conquered. Persia gave them poetic script. China offered bureaucratic clarity. And the Mongols, they mixed and masked it all. Messages during the height of the empire were sometimes written in 2 or 3 languages on the same document. A single letter might open in Mongolian, give instructions in Persian, and close in Chinese. This wasn't just about understanding, it was about intimidation. It signaled the empire's reach. We speak your tongue, and 5 others. But beneath the words, scholars believe were codes. Not just symbolic metaphors or clever phrasing, but genuine structured encryptions. Some reports mention letters that made sense only when read backward, or only every 3rd word was meaningful. Others hint at color-coded dots, stylized strokes, or patterned folds that changed a message's meaning depending on how it was read. Unfortunately for modern historians, almost none of these code books survive. That leaves a tantalizing gap. Was this truly a system of encryption, or just layered bureaucracy mistaken for mystery? Some researchers argue that the complexity was deliberate, a kind of information obfuscation designed to keep even loyal couriers from understanding what they carried. Others think it's romantic speculation fed by stories like that of Rashid al-Din, the Persian historian who once described secret writing that could be seen only by firelight. The truth, probably somewhere in between. The Mongols did use multilingual scripts, and they certainly practiced message concealment writing between lines under flaps on wax-sealed slivers of wood. But whether there was a standardized code system remains a scholarly gray zone. One overlooked detail: the use of borrowed scribes. Some messengers carried blank letters and dictated messages at their destinations using trusted local scribes who wrote in regional scripts. That's efficient, but also dangerous. What if the scribe betrayed you? What if they inserted their own message? There's at least one case of a scribe switching allegiance mid-task. He altered a sentence in a royal decree to redirect an army away from his homeland. The ruse worked. The city survived. And the scribe, once discovered, vanished into history, likely by force. The other curious tactic: disguise. Some messages were sewn into clothes using a thin thread soaked in powdered ink. Once delivered, the recipient would soak the garment in water, revealing the hidden writing as the ink rehydrated. Others used invisible ink, made from citrus juice or rice water, readable only when heated. But the strangest one tale tells of a skull cleaned and carved with script in tiny lettering, then painted to look like decoration. Smuggled as a relic, it passed through several borders unnoticed until decoded at its final stop. Is it true? Hard to say. But when it comes to Mongol-era message tactics, the line between myth and method often blurs. Even the materials mattered. While parchment and paper were common, especially in Persian and Chinese territories, some frontier regions still used wooden slips, turtle shells, or silk panels. A letter could arrive rolled inside a bamboo tube, tied with horsehair, and stamped with a seal so faint you'd miss it unless the light hit just right. Historians still argue whether these practices were widespread or limited to elite communication. Did every message get this treatment, or only those with world-changing potential? Whatever the case, secrecy was never just about protection. It was about power. To hide a message was to hold leverage. To decode it was to shape empires. And so somewhere in a dusty archive, or beneath the sands of a forgotten city, a message might still lie written in a tongue no one speaks anymore, in a code no one remembers, waiting for eyes that understand. The desert is cruel to parchment. Too dry and the ink flakes. Too humid and it runs like blood. And yet somewhere beneath the dunes, sealed packets remain. Folded, tightly stitched shut, buried in pots, or hidden inside camel saddles. Not all were meant to be found. Some were never meant to arrive. You crouch beside a shallow pit. A clay jar peeks through the sand. Its mouth is sealed with wax, its sides scorched black. Inside a scroll, half burned, half legible. A message interrupted. This is where the Mongol mail trails turn strange. As the empire expanded into arid zones across the Gobi, into the Iranian plateau, and along the edges of the Taklamakan, its couriers adapted. Regular yam posts were harder to maintain. Horses tired faster. Routes shifted with the dunes. And sometimes when messages couldn't safely pass, they were hidden. We now know of at least a dozen such desert caches, places where letters were deliberately buried, concealed, or disguised. Some were decoys, written in obvious scripts, but bearing meaningless orders. Others carried sensitive content troop movements, diplomatic requests, demands for tribute. But why hide them, and why burn some? One theory suggests these were emergency drops. If a rider believed they were being followed or risked capture, they'd stash the message rather than let it fall into enemy hands. Others think some messages were never meant to be delivered. They were part of intelligence traps left to be found by spies and traitors. Think of it as medieval misinformation. There's a scholarly debate around one such cache uncovered near Merv in modern-day Turkmenistan. Among the fragments were letters in 3 languages, one addressed to a local warlord, offering him alliance or exile. But the dates don't line up. Was it planted later, forged by rivals, or just misfiled by time? And then there's the curious matter of the wax seals. Several partial messages show signs of double sealing that is opened and reclosed. Some believe certain yam keepers acted as double agents reading messages before passing them along. Others suggest the messages changed hands mid-route, rewritten, or updated before reaching their target. One of the quirkiest finds a message wrapped around a flat stone encased in goat fat and buried inside a wineskin. Archaeologists think it was meant to be tossed down a well as a backup hiding place. It was found centuries later, still faintly scented with rosemary oil, a trace of the original preservation technique. The materials varied wildly. In colder regions, parchment held up. In drier climes, silk worked better. In emergency cases, messages were scratched onto bark bone or flattened reeds. Some are so fragile now that they're read using infrared imaging or reflected UV light, revealing faded ink invisible to the eye. What's missing from the historical record is context. Most of these messages are fragments torn, burned, or cryptically short. They name people lost to time. They reference places that no longer exist. And yet, they carry an eerie weight glimpses of urgency fear strategy. Some scholars compare them to battlefield whispers left behind like ghost conversations. Others think they were never meant to outlive their moment, ephemeral instructions meant to vanish with the wind. But even whispers leave trails. One message recovered near an ancient desert trade route contains a line that has puzzled historians for decades. He knows the road, but not the rider. Was it code? A proverb A, warning, no one agrees. And perhaps that's the point. These fragments weren't written for us. They were designed for specific eyes, specific moments. We are the eavesdroppers centuries too late. So the next time you glance at a crumpled receipt or a post-it note and think it disposable, remember this under a foot of sand. In a place the wind forgot someone's life, once hung on a scrap of silk, and a name only one man was meant to read. The marketplace hums with clinking coins, bleeding goats, and gossip thick enough to choke on. Amid silk bolts and dried apricots, a trader unrolls a scroll, not to haggle, but to deliver news. It's not his business, but it is his route. In the Mongol Empire, even merchants carried messages. This wasn't by accident. It was strategy. The Mongols, for all their warrior reputation, understood one essential truth. Empires breathe through trade. Caravans flowed east to west across the Silk Roads, and where camels went, information followed. So rather than treat merchants as mere bystanders, the empire gave them partial access to the yam network. With the right token, or a temporary jurej, a trader could act as a courier. That meant the news didn't just move from palace to palace. It filtered through bazaars, caravanserais, and roadside tents. Gold and grain changed hands, so did rumors, warnings, and coded instructions. Some historians believe this decentralized strategy was intentional. By allowing merchants to carry certain messages, the empire created a web of redundancy. If one courier failed, 10 traders might carry the same message through different paths. Others suggest it was more accidental, born from pragmatism. Traders already moved faster and farther than many soldiers. Why not use them? What we do know is that this practice blurred the lines between commerce and command. A shipment of wool might contain a sealed note tucked between bolts. A merchant seeking shelter might pass a whispered phrase to a loyal yam keeper. Sometimes information itself was the trade. There's one quirky case. A caravan leader in Samarkand reportedly used coded embroidery, each stitch pattern corresponding to a specific word. He sold decorative saddlecloths that doubled as encrypted messages. Whether this was a one-off or part of a larger method is still debated, but it wasn't always so covert. In many cases, the messages merchants carried weren't secret, just urgent. Tax records, inventory confirmations, grain prices, who had surplus millet this season, who owed the Khan's court 50 sheep. Even these mundane notes could shift policy. If grain was scarce in one region, the empire might redirect troops to another or adjust taxes. The speed of such decisions relied on accurate merchant messaging. And sometimes it got messier. Gossip traveled as fast as silk. A disgruntled trader might embellish a border conflict, leading to unnecessary troop deployments. A merchant with imperial connections could sabotage a rival by passing on rumors of treason. There's at least one case in which a merchant's false report led to a town being fined and later burned. Scholars continue to debate whether this merchant mail system was officially regulated. Some argue it had structured protocols, stamps, signatures, expected delivery windows. Others believe it was far looser, based more on personal trust, reputation, and the ability to bribe yam station guards when needed. The Mongol rulers seemed to accept this risk, or perhaps they saw value in it. By flooding the system with overlapping messages from multiple sources, they created noise but also resilience. Even if one message was intercepted or altered, others would fill the gaps. And in return, traders gained something precious: protection. By acting as message carriers, they often received travel privileges, armed escorts, and diplomatic immunity. A merchant with a letter from the Khan was less likely to be robbed, at least in theory. One curious artifact: a ledger found in Persia listing tolls waived for traders carrying ink burdens. Historians believe this refers to merchants granted free passage because they carried imperial correspondence alongside their goods. Still, trust had limits. Traders were rarely allowed to carry military orders or secret diplomatic notes. Those remained in the hands of official couriers. But the merchant role filled a different niche: the soft news, the logistical backbone, the economic pulse. And so in dusty border towns and echoing mountain inns, you'd hear at a trader muttering figures by firelight, then leaning close to whisper a name. Not every whisper started a war, but some ended them. The fortress stands silent under a crescent moon, its gates shut tight. Then hoofbeats. A rider charges out of the dark, flings a scroll into waiting hands, and is gone before the guards can even light their torches. The message, no longer than a prayer, contains the orders of a Khan. In 2 days, this garrison will march east. In 10, an empire will shift. Speed in the Mongol world wasn't a luxury, it was a weapon. We often imagine empires growing through war and conquest, but for the Mongols, speed may have mattered just as much as steel. Royal orders weren't sent once a month by lumbering cart. They flew leapfrogging across the steppe in bursts of gallop and gravel, thanks to the lightning rhythm of the yam. A command issued in Karakoram could reach Baghdad some 3,000 miles away in just 2 weeks. That's a rate unmatched by most medieval powers, and rivaled only centuries later by the telegraph. But how the system was built for velocity. Couriers rode in shifts, changing horses every 25-30 miles at yam stations. Some routes had extra horses tethered along the way, ready and restless, just for moments like this. In urgent cases, messengers carried a tamga, a kind of emergency pass that signaled no delays No diversions, no disobedience. There's one widely cited, but still debated account of a royal command reaching an army before its scouts even reported the battle's location. Some scholars doubt the timeline, but others argue that with the right conditions, the YAM system really could move that fast. The quirky part. These messages weren't just verbal or handwritten. They often involved performance. A writer might recite a command aloud, burn the original document, and carry only the words in his mind. One letter was reportedly tattooed onto a man's thigh, hidden beneath his robes to avoid interception. Painful, yes. Secure, also yes. Sometimes the orders were brief. Hold, advance, no survivors. Other times they were elaborate dictating battle formations, alliances, even tax policies for distant cities. But in all cases, the assumption was simple. The faster the order arrived, the more effective it would be. Timing was everything. A single delay, due to storm injury or suspicion, could unravel an entire campaign. That's why couriers were chosen for endurance, loyalty, and, how should we put it, a flexible relationship with sleep. One imperial edict from Ogedei Khan specifically ordered rest stations to provide not just food and shelter, but quick broth and hot stones to revive exhausted riders. These weren't luxuries, they were survival tactics. And the empire didn't just rely on one route. Messages might be duplicated and sent by different paths, increasing the chances that at least one would arrive on time. In some cases, riders even carried homing pigeons or smoke signal devices as backup, not exactly reliable, but better than nothing when a battle hung in the balance. There's still debate over how these lightning-speed communications shaped Mongol success. Some argue it allowed for unparalleled coordination. Troops moved in harmony, allies were alerted, early revolts quashed before they took root. Others believe the system was overhyped and that most of the credit still lies with the military's adaptability. But even the critics admit when it worked, it worked. One curious footnote. There are letters from European envoys who were stunned by how quickly the Mongols responded to their messages. In one case, a papal delegate sent word from the Caucasus and received a formal reply before he'd even reached the next town. He described it as a reply borne on wind. So yes, swords carved territory, but speed carved power. Imagine being the recipient of such a letter. Your town is quiet, your fields bare. Then a rider approaches at dusk. He speaks 3 words, hands you a stamped scroll, and gallops off. Inside, the Khan's order raised troops. Supply grain. Prepare for a siege. By dawn, your world has changed. The boots are soft-soled, the cloak loose, the face shadowed beneath a veil. The rider's hands are gloved. The horse lean, but quick. This courier does not stop at yam stations. She does not present a jurage. She slips between borders at dusk and is gone before the crows stir. Her message is not official, but it matters. In the Mongol Empire, not all messengers were men, and not all were visible. From Persian chronicles to Mongolian epics, hints of female couriers and spies appear like brushstrokes in the margins, never the focus, but unmistakably present. Some were wives or daughters of tribal leaders entrusted with diplomatic letters. Others were performers, merchants, or midwives by day, messengers by moonlight. And while much remains buried under centuries of selective storytelling, the whispers persist. Women rode, listened, reported. They carried secrets stitched into hems, folded into hair combs, or whispered through lullabies no one questioned. One account describes a noblewoman in Bukhara who routinely smuggled messages to the court under the guise of embroidery lessons. The pattern she stitched changed subtly, with each visit color-coded signals woven into thread. Her cover was never blown. Her name, unfortunately, was never recorded. Another tale, half legend, half likely, speaks of a female courier who disguised herself as a grieving widow. Her mournful caravan passed enemy checkpoints with ease. Beneath her shroud, weapons, gold, and letters promising allegiance to the Khan. Some say the plot worked. Others suggest it ended in betrayal. As always, the truth is tucked beneath layers of rumor. Scholars continue to debate the scale of female participation in Mongol intelligence. Some argue it was rare exceptions, born of unique trust or family status. Others believe the practice was more common, especially in border regions where mobility and disguise were essential. The empire, after all, valued effectiveness over tradition. Women ran households, commanded troops, managed estates. Why not carry messages and spies? Oh, they existed. In every empire they do. The Mongols were no exception, and their use of female agents added a level of stealth few expected. Women could go where armed men could not. They could serve as entertainers, servants, pilgrims. Their presence was often overlooked. Their eyes, never. One of the more peculiar stories involves a traveling healer, a woman with knowledge of herbs and birth practices who moved freely between camps. She was later accused of spying, though no proof was ever found. Whether innocent or brilliant remains unsolved. There's even a preserved letter from a general requesting a swift and silent courier, preferably female, to deliver a sealed pouch through a disputed pass. Why female? The route was under surveillance. A woman was less likely to be searched. She made the journey. The message arrived. History, however, did not remember her name. Some artifacts hint at these hidden lives. Hairpins that unscrew to reveal tiny scrolls. Belt buckles with double linings. Decorative pendants, etched with codes so fine they resembled filigree. Were these everyday accessories or tools of empire? Historians remain divided. The documentation is scarce, the evidence fragmentary. But the patterns, like those secret stitches, keep appearing. And of course, not all female messengers were covert. In certain tribes within the Mongol Confederation, women held formal ranks. They could be assigned as emissaries or witnesses to treaties. Their gender was not a barrier, it was a variable. One that could be used, shaped, hidden, or flaunted, depending on the message. The empire's greatest strength may have been this, its refusal to waste a good opportunity. Be it a weathered horse, a foreign script, or a quick-thinking midwife with sharp eyes and steady hands. So next time you picture the Mongol messenger, a lone figure streaking across the plains, consider that under the helmet or hood, a braid may have been tucked. A lullaby may have doubled as a warning, and history, once again, may have chosen the louder voices, while the quieter ones carried the most dangerous truths. The horse falters. The wind howls like it wants to speak. Dust blinds your eyes. Snow stings your skin. And the road, if it ever was, one is gone. You press forward, hunched breath ragged. Behind you, orders from the Khan. Ahead, only sky and storm. The empire waits, but nature does not. Even the fastest messenger could be undone by weather. For all their innovations, the yam, the garage, the stitch scripts, the Mongols were still at the mercy of the elements. Their couriers crossed mountains, steppes, deserts, and swamps. Each terrain came with its own moods, and when those moods soured, the message often died with the messenger. Rain soaked parchment until it bled into uselessness. Snow froze, ink stiffened joints, turned trusted horses into statues. Sandstorms swallowed riders whole so suddenly that their roots vanished behind them like chalk wiped from a slate. One account from a Persian chronicler tells of a winter messenger caught in a sudden freeze. Found weeks later, his horse long gone, the man clutched a letter still dry inside his tunic. The message reached its target, delivered by a second rider, after the first was thawed and honored with a hasty burial. Scholars still debate how many messages were lost to natural causes. Some argue the numbers were small testament to the resilience of the system. Others believe they were many, but undocumented. After all, who records a message that never arrived? In recent years, archaeological digs in Mongolia and northern China have turned up what seem to be mail fragments, parchment, half buried in peat bogs, bone tubes, scorched by lightning, even a sealed packet found inside a cave, protected by centuries of stalactite drip. We know they were messages. We just don't know what they said. The quirky detail. Some yam stations had weather rituals. In regions prone to dust storms or blizzards, station keepers reportedly hung charms made from wolf teeth or goat horns, meant to ward off bad weather or protect the next rider. Did it work? Probably not. But when you're handing a stranger a scroll and pointing him into a whiteout, a little magic can't hurt. There's even a folk rhyme preserved in Mongol oral tradition. Horse may outrun sword, but never rain cloud. It was a warning and a reminder. The greatest army could be delayed by fog. The smallest letter could become lethal if snow found it first. One story tells of a village whose fate turned on a lost message. A surrender request was sent by a Mongol general ahead of a planned siege meant to give the town a chance to capitulate peacefully. The courier never arrived. The storm took him. When the army came, they assumed defiance. The town was razed. Did it happen? Historians aren't sure. The story survives only in fragments, retold across generations. But whether true or cautionary myth, it illustrates the razor-thin line between diplomacy and devastation. Some couriers tried to adapt. They wrapped messages in waxed fabric. Others carried multiple copies hidden in separate pouches. One writer is said to have memorized his message in 4 languages, just in case he lost the written copy and had to recite it to someone who spoke a different tongue. But nature was an uncooperative co-ruler. In the Mongol world, the Khan issued orders, but the wind often rewrote them. Even today, weather researchers studying ancient climate patterns point to sudden temperature drops and prolonged droughts during the empire's height. These shifts didn't just affect crops or livestock, they altered the very arteries of information. A blocked pass here, a flooded river there, and a whole province might go silent for weeks. Which leaves us with a curious thought. How many turning points in history were actually just missed messages? How many battles could have been avoided? How many alliances secured, if not for an ill-timed snowfall? So next time your train is delayed, your text undelivered, your email swallowed by spam, think of that lone rider in the fog. Somewhere between Karakorum and the Caspian Sea, a gust of wind decided the fate of a city. A horse approaches the city wall alone. No banners, no entourage, just a rider carrying a sealed scroll. He does not speak. He does not dismount. The guards read the message, and within hours the gates open. No arrows fly. No blood is spilled. The city has surrendered by mail. Welcome to one of the strangest weapons in the Mongol arsenal, the letter of conquest. While the Mongol reputation today leans heavily on tales of fire and sword, not every victory was won with violence. Some were delivered by messengers sealed with the Khan's emblem and soaked metaphorically in quiet menace. These letters were blunt. Some offered terms submit now and retain local rule, pay tribute, provide troops, refuse and expect destruction. Others skipped the courtesy, declaring the city already under Mongol rule and demanding immediate compliance. The implication was clear surrender or vanish. Historians refer to these as pre-written conquests, a kind of psychological warfare delivered by courier. The effect was often devastating. Isolated cities, aware of Mongol speed and brutality, frequently chose survival. A letter was safer than a siege. One particularly famous case involves the city of Nishapur. After receiving a message demanding allegiance, the city hesitated. A second message arrived within days, shorter, colder. The third came with no words, only a finger wrapped in silk. The city opened its gates. There's a scholarly divide on whether these messages were standardized. Some believe the Mongols used templates dictated by the Khan's court, translated into local languages and delivered en masse. Others argue the messages were tailored, crafted based on intelligence about the city's leadership, defenses, and loyalties. Either way, they worked. Letters spared the empire unnecessary battles. Resources were preserved. Fear not force did the heavy lifting. But not all towns bent the knee. Some destroyed the messages, assuming it would delay Mongol action. In one case, a letter bearer was executed by a defiant city council. The Mongols responded by razing the town within 3 days. Its name is now a footnote. One curious tactic, the Mongols sometimes sent multiple messengers carrying slightly different versions of the same letter. One would offer generous terms. Another would be stern. A third might sound almost casual. The idea: let the city rulers argue among themselves, second-guessing what the real threat was. Confusion as a weapon. And the letters themselves, often more theatrical than diplomatic. Wax seals bearing snarling tigers. Scripts scrawled in blood-colored ink. Some messages opened with poetry, Persian verses about the futility of resistance. Others began with silence, blank space, until the final brutal line, "Your land is already ours." The quirky detail. In at least one surviving scroll, a Mongol general sketched a crude map of the city, alongside the message with arrows drawn toward the gates, possibly a bluff, possibly a plan. Either way, the message read, "We already see you." So were these letters diplomacy or terror. The academic debate continues. Some argue they were part of a sophisticated political strategy: extend peace, when possible offer autonomy, absorb infrastructure. Others see them as pure intimidation, designed to soften resistance and maximize control with minimal effort. Either way, they reshaped the battlefield. To receive one of these letters was to stare into a mirror of consequences. Accept and live with tribute and foreign oversight. Reject and gamble on survival. Few gambled twice. In rare cases, cities sent back letters of their own. Some begged for time. Others promised loyalty in exchange for protection from rival tribes. One town, upon receiving its ultimatum, responded with a basket of local sweets and a poem praising Genghis Khan's wisdom. The message was accepted. The city was spared. Even silence could be a reply. And the Mongols knew how to answer that too. So as you imagine these missives riding across the steppe paper, born into wind fear, folded into script, consider their power. A war not fought with swords, but with clauses. An empire expanded by the gallop of grammar, and all of it sealed, delivered, and sometimes obeyed. A flick of red wax, the soft press of a carved symbol, and a messenger's fingers linger just a moment longer. Not for affection, for proof. This is the final step. Not writing, not delivering, but sealing. And that little stamp, it means everything. In the Mongol Empire, messages didn't speak until they bore a seal. It might seem small, just a dab of wax, or a clay lump, or a drop of molten lead, but these stamps were the voice of authority. They whispered, this came from power. Without a seal, a message was just rumor. With one, it became law. Each seal was unique. Some bore the Khan's emblem, a fearsome creature, a stylized falcon, or the Mongolian eternal knot. Others carried tribal symbols, merchant marks, or personal monograms of military officials. They weren't just signatures, they were status, and they came in materials that reflected that. Imperial edicts might bear gold-infused wax. Field orders used red clay. Messages from the provinces pressed in beeswax mixed with local herbs to ward off tampering. A single sealed message could tell you who sent it, how urgent it was, and whether opening it without permission meant your head would roll. The quirky part. Some seals included subtle scents, yes scent. Mixed with wax were crushed rose petals, saffron, or dried mint. Not for luxury, but recognition. Smell alone might confirm authenticity in the dark, or for those who couldn't read. But before sealing came scribes, the unsung heroes of the messaging machine. In yam stations and city halls across palaces and tents, scribes translated, transcribed, and templated the words of empire. Fluent in Persian, Chinese, Mongolian, Uyghur. Sometimes Latin or Arabic they wrote on parchment paper, silk, even thin strips of birch bark. Their job was to take a rough directive and render it official. The tone mattered. Too soft, and it sounded unsure. Too harsh, and it might provoke revolt. These scribes knew politics better than most generals. One surviving letter from Guyuk Khan to Pope Innocent IV is a masterclass in veiled threat. It opens with formality, flirts with diplomacy, and ends by reminding the Pope that submission is the only path to peace. It's elegant, terrifying, and immaculately written. Some scribes were born into the role. Others were captured scholars kept alive for their penmanship. Their loyalties were complex. They served the empire, but their words could tilt the balance of diplomacy sometimes without anyone realizing. Scholars still debate how much creative license scribes had. Did they simply transcribe what was dictated? Or did they edit, shape, improve? There's at least one instance where a letter's tone softened between drafts. The first, brusque and demanding. The second, polished, persuasive. Same seal, different feeling. The shift was traced to a scribe named Kutla. Whether he was praised or punished remains unclear, but his version worked. The city surrendered. And then there were forgeries. The Mongols weren't immune to deception. Rebel factions and foreign spies learned to copy seals. Some were crude too, round too deep. Others fooled even seasoned eyes. That's why some messages included hidden features, a diagonal cut in the parchment, a pattern of tiny pinholes, or invisible ink dots, only visible under candle soot. Seals became more than just stamps. They were security systems. A curious survival is a lead seal, bearing both Mongol script and a Chinese phoenix. It's believed to have been used for messages between the Yuan dynasty and Central Asian governors. Its craftsmanship is exquisite, and its symbolism layered the steppe and the scholar. Speed and subtlety. But not every seal had such grandeur. A yam station master's stamp might be nothing more than a carved wood block. Still, it meant something. It said, "This message passed through my hands. I vouch for it." In an empire of motion that mattered. Even today, seals are unearthed in places far beyond Mongolia, Hungary, Syria, Siberia. Some are intact, others broken, the message lost. Yet their impression remains literally and figuratively. So the next time you ignore a waxy envelope or dismiss a signature as formality, think back to the Mongol scribes bent over silk by candlelight pressing empire into clay. They weren't just writing, they were preserving power in the softest, most perishable form. A line of ink, a drop of wax, a whispered seal of silence. A scroll unfurls on a marble table in Venice. It's edged with gold leaf, written in 4 scripts, and signed with a name unfamiliar to the West Guyuk Khan. The recipient, the Pope. The message, not quite a greeting. The Mongol mail didn't stop at the edges of Asia. It crossed oceans, deserts, and ideologies. Most people imagine the Mongol Empire as inward-facing, concerned with conquests, tribute, and control. But their messengers rode far beyond the known borders, reaching foreign courts with letters that alternated between diplomacy and demands. These weren't polite introductions. They were power plays. One of the most famous examples is a letter sent to Pope Innocent IV in 1246 by Guyuk Khan, carried by a Christian envoy named John of Plano Carpini. The letter rejected the Pope's request for peace. Instead, it instructed all European rulers to come to the Mongol court and submit. A bold move, especially in parchment. Scholars have analyzed this message endlessly. Its tone is chilly, its language layered. Was it a threat? A cultural misunderstanding? A power assertion lost in translation? Regardless, the letter traveled thousands of miles, likely passing through yam networks, riverboats, and camel caravans. And when it arrived, it did what Mongol letters often did: it disturbed the peace without drawing a blade. Europe wasn't the only recipient. Mongol letters also arrived in Egypt, Japan, and India. Some brought requests for alliance, others bore ultimatums. A few were pure theater-lavish scrolls, wrapped in silk, scented with herbs, and sealed with symbols that glowed red in firelight. There's a surviving message sent to the Mamluks of Egypt that still raises eyebrows. Its language is curt, barely concealing disdain. It threatens war if tribute isn't paid. Yet it's signed with respectful titles, perhaps to soften the blow, perhaps just a quirk of translation. And then, of course, there's Japan. Kublai Khan sent not 1 but 2 letters to the Japanese emperor in the late 13th century. The first was diplomatic, offering alliance and peace. The second, after Japan failed to respond, was harsher. Neither letter received an answer. What followed were the infamous Mongol invasions, both ultimately foiled by typhoons the Japanese called kamikaze, or divine wind. Some historians argue the letters were genuine attempts at peace. Others believe they were preludes to invasion, designed only to give the appearance of negotiation before the ship set sail. Either way, the words went first, as they often did. The Mongols understood the psychology of mail. A letter could be diplomatic cover for a looming threat. It could buy time test the enemy's nerves, or simply assert dominance across linguistic lines. But not all messages were hostile. In some cases, Mongol rulers sent gifts along with their letters: gems, spices, exotic animals. These weren't bribes exactly, more like gestures of superiority. Look what we have, they seem to say. Join us, and you can have some. One quirky example. A preserved letter sent to the rulers of the Song dynasty in southern China was tied with a ribbon made of horsehair and scented with juniper resin. It included a side note praising the Song court's taste in poetry and a gentle reminder that they'd be better off as vassals. Even more curious are the letters that never made it. There are half-written drafts found in Mongol archives, some scribbled with marginal notes, others stained with drink or ash. These discarded messages suggest a more calculated process than often assumed. The Mongols didn't just bark orders. They weighed tone language and target audience carefully. Modern scholars still debate how much freedom Mongol scribes had when crafting messages to foreign powers. Were they dictated word for word by the Khan? Or were they co-authors in empire-building penning lines that danced between praise and pressure? Whatever the process, the result is clear. Mongol mail left an impression far beyond its parchment. Imagine being a European knight, handed a scroll from a distant ruler who claims dominion over the world. Imagine being a Japanese courtier, reading the words of a man you've never seen yet, who speaks as if he already owns your land. You'd read twice, maybe 3 times, and whether you replied or not, you'd never forget it. The water is black and choppy beneath the keel. Salt crusts the edges of the scroll case, tied to the courier's waist. Above, gulls scream as if warning of something. But the message must go. The steppe has ended, and now the empire sails. When the Mongol borders kissed the sea, their riders had to stop. Boats had to begin. The Mongols were masters of land. Horses, plains, mountain passes, these were their elements. But as the empire expanded to include coastal territories and island kingdoms, it had to confront its old enemy water. Not just in war, but in mail. This was unfamiliar ground quite literally. While yam stations dotted the land routes, like beads on a string, there was no equivalent system on the water. Couriers had to adapt. So they took to the waves, sometimes in tiny coastal skiffs, sometimes in larger Chinese junks, or Persian trade ships. And they hated it. There are scattered accounts of steppe-born messengers clinging to masts, vomiting into buckets, or praying to unfamiliar gods as storms tossed them about. These weren't seasoned mariners. They were riders turned reluctant sailors. Still, the mail had to move. One notable route stretched from the eastern Chinese coast across the East China Sea toward the Korean peninsula and further toward Japan. These were not joyrides. They were dangerous journeys over unpredictable waters. Messages were triple-wrapped in oilcloth, sometimes encased in lacquered boxes, sometimes tied to the courier's body in case of shipwreck. And shipwrecks happened. Often. There's a recovered scroll fragment from a sunken Mongol ship near Takashima, Japan. The ink is faded, the script barely legible, but its survival tells a story even at sea. The message mattered. In some cases, messages were entrusted to foreign sailors, Persian mariners, Chinese captains, Korean merchants. These non-Mongol couriers were given temporary authority, sometimes even miniature jurijas to carry official documents across the waves. Did they always deliver? Hard to say. But enough did to keep the empire's outer limbs twitching with news. The quirky part. Some messengers reportedly trained seabirds to carry tiny notes over short water gaps, like pigeons but wetter. Whether this was reliable or wishful thinking remains debated. One letter from a Korean official warns that the birds do not always return. Another strange method, message gourds. Yes, gourds. Hollowed, sealed, and sometimes floated down rivers with simple instructions burned onto the outer skin. To the station south. Not fast, not foolproof, but clever. Still, maritime messaging never achieved the speed or reliability of its land-based cousin. Weather pirates and imperial rivalries slowed everything down. One message to a Mongol garrison in Java reportedly took over 6 months to arrive, delayed by monsoons and missing ships. Some historians argue this weakness helped set the limits of the Mongol expansion. They could ride forever, but they couldn't sail that far. Their authority faded with the tide. Others disagree, pointing to well-organized ports in Yuan-controlled China and naval campaigns that, while not always successful, were impressively coordinated. The sea didn't break the system, it simply redefined it. One preserved maritime letter speaks to that shift. Sent from a southern coastal outpost to the court, it begins not with a greeting, but with a weather report. The sea is angry today, it says, but the tide favors our message. Poetic, slightly sarcastic, entirely Mongol. Curiously, as the sea routes grew, so did the cultural blend within the messaging system. A scroll might begin in Persian, include a middle section in Chinese, and close in Mongolian script, all within a single message meant to be read by multiple hands along its journey. Scribes began to specialize in C-letter formats. They learned how to write on treated bark, how to fold waterproof styles, how to inscribe messages into wax tablets. A lost art, mostly. But some of those waterproof folds survive creases still crisp after 700 years. So imagine the courier seasick and soaked, cradling a scroll like it's gold. Not just for the message inside, but for what it represents empire reach obligation. On land, the Mongols rode like thunder. At sea, they whispered through waves. And even when the message arrived, blurred or battered, it still carried weight. It still meant we are here. Even across the water. The station is empty. The fire is cold. Cobwebs cross the stable beams like forgotten messages themselves. No horses stamp their hooves. No riders come through. The yam is silent. Every great system has its end. The Mongol yam, once a marvel of speed control and imperial will, began to unravel not with a bang, but with a slow and steady disintegration. Not because it failed, but because the empire did. When the central Mongol authority began to fracture in the 14th century, the yam lost its backbone. Civil wars flared between rival khanates, the Golden Horde, the Chagatai Khanate, the Ilkhanate, and the Yuan dynasty in China. Each faction had its own rules, its own priorities, its own distrust of the others. And that, of course, meant the mail stopped flowing. Messages that once rode across steppes in days now disappeared for months. Yam stations were looted by passing armies. Horses were conscripted for war. Even loyal station keepers fled, realizing their seals no longer protected them. Historians still debate whether the collapse of the yam was a symptom of the empire's fall or part of the cause. Did the loss of fast communication make it harder for the khans to coordinate? Did it allow uprisings to fester messages to go missing armies, to move unchallenged? The answer is probably yes to all. One documented case involves a commander in the Ilkhanate who never received a call for reinforcements. His region was overrun. Another story tells of a treaty that never arrived in time, its carrier killed by bandits on a road that just years earlier had been patrolled and safe. The quirky detail. Even as the yam crumbled, some stations tried to keep operating out of habit, out of hope. There's a Persian account of a lone yam keeper who maintained his post for years, despite no riders coming through. He fed the horses himself, wrote daily logs, and waited. When a messenger finally arrived, he wept. The message was a war order, and the station was soon torched by rebels. By the mid-1300s, local rulers had begun replacing the yam with their own smaller systems, fragmented, slower, and deeply regional. The great unified artery that had once pumped information across continents became a mess of capillaries barely connected. Trade suffered. Diplomacy lagged. rebellions grew bolder, and with the yam's decline came the rise of impersonators. Bandits posed as couriers. False seals passed hands. In one instance, a city was tricked into surrendering to a forged letter delivered on horseback, signed with a name no longer in power. This erosion of trust further weakened the system. No one knew which messages to believe. No one wanted to host a courier who might be a spy. The yam, once a source of order, had become a liability. Scholars argue about which moment truly marked the end. Was it the sack of the Yuan court in 1368, the disintegration of Ilkhanid Persia, the final collapse of yam stations in Central Asia? Or was the real end, quieter, just a stretch of road no longer used, a satchel rotting in a ditch, a scroll unread and unmissed? Even the surviving relics tell of the fade. Seals found in broken yam stations, letters half burned, half buried, saddles with no riders, horses long gone. And yet, curiously, the ghost of the yam lingered. Some of its methods, relay stations, sealed documents, official routes were adopted by successor states. The Persian postal system re-emerged with Mongol influence. The Ottomans borrowed the concept. In Russia, the yam evolved into the yamshchik, a post-rider system used well into the 19th century. But the unity was gone. The dream of a single rider, galloping from the Pacific to the Black Sea, stopping every 30 miles to switch horses and deliver empire-shaping words that belonged to another time. And so as you walk the overgrown paths, where messengers once thundered past, crumbling stone posts and sun-bleached tether beams, you might still feel it, a trace of urgency, of presence. The empire spoke here. It whispered, commanded, threatened, and now it's silent. The yam didn't crash. It faded like hoofprints in dry grass. The mailbox is boring. It hums with bills and catalogs and pizza flyers. But beneath its dull metal skin is the ghost of galloping hooves, wax seals, and dust trails. Because what you just used to send a birthday card or return a form is older than most empires. It carries in its bones a whisper of the Mongol yam. Legacies hide in strange places. Long after the Mongol Empire fractured its mail system, lived on not as a brand, but as a blueprint. The concept of a relay network with standardized posts, official documentation, and protected couriers spread westward. What had once been a steppe innovation slowly became an international standard. Persian rulers, rebuilding from Mongol rule, kept many elements of the yam. They adjusted it for local geography, added Persian flourishes, and called it their own. In the Ottoman Empire, an organized postal system emerged that bore eerie similarities. Messengers with credentials, stations with food and stables, and punishment for delays. Europe, too, took notes. Literally. Marco Polo's accounts of the Mongol relay network fascinated European readers. His descriptions of efficient couriers, rapid travel, and imperial control sparked interest among kings and merchants alike. By the 15th century, the Habsburgs had implemented postal systems that echoed Mongol practices. And in the 19th century, American West, far from yurts and falcons, the Pony Express galloped across plains with a method almost identical to the yam. Riders switched horses every 10 miles. They carried messages in pouches. They rode through danger alone, fast and trusted. Sound familiar? There's no direct line, of course. No single document saying this idea was borrowed from the Mongols. But the parallels are strong enough to make historians nod knowingly. Innovations travel even when the innovators are gone. The quirky detail. Some Mongol seal designs have reappeared in modern postal emblems. A stylized eagle here. A circle enclosing a steppe symbol there. Coincidence? Maybe. But sometimes symbols fly farther than messages. Today, when you track a package online or see a postal carrier walking the same daily route, you're witnessing the slow evolution of an idea born in the saddle. The technology has changed. The message is no longer memorized or stitched into cloth. But the goal is the same: to connect. And while most mail now moves at the speed of light, the idea of protected passage, trusted delivery, and encoded authority still applies. Encryption keys are the garage of the digital world. Delivery routes are today's YAM paths, and the debate over privacy, authenticity, and access as old as the seal pressed into wax beside a Mongol campfire. Some scholars believe the Mongol model influenced not just postal systems, but diplomacy. The idea of credentialed envoys protected under international norms owes something to the garage-bearing messengers of the past. A quiet figure with a tablet that said, "Do not harm." This one speaks for power. Even in fiction, the echoes persist. Fantasy novels feature royal riders racing across kingdoms. Sci-fi worlds create interstellar YAM networks with couriers delivering fragile alliances across galaxies. Wherever humans imagine empires, they imagine mail. So next time you hear the flap of your mailbox or the ding of an incoming message, pause. Somewhere centuries ago, a horse exhaled into the frost. A message was passed from gloved hand to gloved hand. A scroll was opened by candlelight and changed a city's fate. You live in a world where those things still matter, just quieter now. Less hoofbeat, more hum. Less wax, more Wi-Fi. But the urge remains the same: to send, to receive, to connect over distance. Whether it's a love letter, a war order, or a grandma's birthday card, you are part of something ancient. The YAM still rides just beneath the asphalt. And now, as the last hoofbeats fade into the dusk and the dust settles along forgotten paths, your mind begins to slow with the rhythm of old messengers at rest. You've traveled far tonight, through wind-swept deserts, frozen mountain passes, secret codes, and silent couriers. Some gallop for emperors, some for merchants, some for no reward at all. Yet each bore a message, and each carried a piece of an empire stitched together by speed, trust, and sheer will. Close your eyes and picture it one last time: a candle flickering in a quiet YAM station, the smell of leather and barley stew, a folded letter still warm from the writer's chest. Outside, the world waits. But here, there is only the hush between dispatch and reply. If this gentle journey helped you rest tonight, maybe leave a sleepy emoji and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. And if you'd like more stories like this, you can always subscribe quietly, of course. No seals required,